welcome to Scottish Rum Festival. My name's Jay McDonald. I am Rum Royalty. I've been doing little interviews with people. I'm having little chats with them. And this is my last of the day. Maybe not the least, but the last for the evening. This is Gary from Rumburra. And he's going to introduce himself, what he does, who he is, and his product. Please.
Thank you, Jamie. Yeah, hi, my name's Gary Wilson. I'm the joint business owner of Rumburra Scotland Limited, and our flagship rum is Rumburra Ore. The name Rumburra is a play on rum in Edinburgh. Our first bottling slot was in Edinburgh, so the name just seemed to link well together. Rum Edinburgh, Rumburra, with the B-U-R-R-A being a softer spelling than the B-U-R-G-H. Our first bottling was, our first label actually had Edinburgh Castle, a bottle of Edinburgh Castle, before we rebranded. So yeah, I'm the joint business owner of Rumburra Scotland Limited, and my wife, the second joint business owner. We have a private investor who's a shareholder in the company. So that's us.
Nice product. So we were just having a chat there, just as we were kind of pre-recording or just, introducing ourselves. Yeah. So we were talking about, Gary said to me, how do I enjoy my rum? And I said, I do like it straight, actually. We're just pouring some out. So we're going to do a tasting, and Gary's going to take us through a tasting. And then we just started sort of talking away quite organically about, how do you like your rums? You know what? And I love it this way, and I love new serving suggestions. I still like old classics as well. My rum's neat, and then we were just discussing, it's the love of, or the pleasure you find, if you come from, say, a whiskey background, dark spirit background, and we were kind of lambasting about some of the festivals, talking about when you meet people, and when you can, especially malt drinkers or people who enjoy that kind of style, which I think will lead us back onto your rum, which is really nice. And then we were just talking about sharing moments about, introducing rum to people, which is really interesting. I always find interesting from a point of view of someone who might not think about it, and not in a negative way, but they're so used to something like a single malt drinker. And we're just both discussing, saying, it's interesting when you get those types of people, you introduce them a kind of rum or a rum style, and the similarities to whiskey, the similarities to that kind of production technique, the raw materials different. And the reason being, because Gary was just hinting that, there's a part of the rum that might have elements that you might think are a touch of whiskey. So you've got a rum in hand, don't you?
Yes, I do.
You've got your
yes.
rum with you?
And it's neat.
Oh, brilliant. Could you show us the bottle as well?
Yeah, of course I can.
Brilliant.
So if I can just talk you through very briefly our bottle, we gave our branding team a challenge, and we said, we want you to come up with a label that looks like it's been here for years, and it's been around for years. And I think they've nailed it. Absolutely nailed it, and the ragged edge of the label. When we went to get the labels made, I spoke to 3 or 4 different label manufacturers, and they were quoting me £1,000 to do this ragged edge. I had a guy in Airdrie who said to me, Gary, he says, I'll tell you what I want to do with your label, and he actually talked me into how he would see the label actually being formed. And I was drawn into this guy, and this guy thought about this. This guy had Rumburra in his heart, and he said, look, 200 quid, I'll get your labels done with these ragged edges. And the guy got my business because he took some time and invested some time into how he thought our label should look, Yeah. So it just shows you. Yeah, so, nice. Yeah, so the rum itself, if we always invite our customers, our clients at markets to nose first, and the aroma is very much, rum's very subjective, Jamie, and lots of different people get different tastes and different aromas from rum. From ours, there's a definitive oaky aroma to this, and down to the aging process, and I think there's subtle caramel hints, possibly banana, and a slight whiskey note.
Yeah, there is, yeah.
And I think rums molasses-based rums can sometimes be very, very sweet.
Yeah.
You know, when you taste them, it does taste that you know, you get that sweetness. Our aging process, which I'm happy to go into, takes some of the sweet edge away from the rum and gives it a bit of a peppery bite. And this is where the link to the whiskey comes in as well, you know. So we'll have some of our tasters saying it tastes too much like whiskey. I don't like it, or I've got a whiskey note here and I love it. And a lot of people have said to us, it's quite unique. You're positioning yourself quite unique in the marketplace. But as we just discussed, you know, because American oak barrels, when the bourbon guys use them once, they've got to punt them, sell them, basically. So the rum guys buy them. So there's going to have to be a whiskey note in there someplace, you know. So the taste. So we're at 42.3% proof ABV. So it's quite a strong rum. And it's got, I would say it's got long legs. You've got a lovely lingering aftertaste, and it travels really well, and it lasts for quite a while. So there's an everlasting kind of aroma taste for this. It's complex. It's very rummy. It's got a slight whiskey note.
Still got,
but for the strength, it's quite smooth. It's quite smooth for the strength. So, you know, I've had discussions when we're doing our markets and festivals. I think it's a sipping rum. Yeah, I would agree it is a sipping rum. I've had some connoisseurs have said, no, it's not a sipping rum. It's not smooth enough. It's subjective. It's absolutely subjective. And we can't get your thoughts. You know?
I mean, there is. I mean, I think it's lovely. There's a sweetness to it. There's a lot of delicacies that's come through, and kind of stone fruit that's coming through. You get that, you know, the medium length coming off the alcohol as well. There's a lot of, and not in a bad way, there's a lot of wood at the front. You know, there's a lot of vanilla coming through there from the oak.
Just enough
bourbon barrels. And a little bit of just a hint of smoke that comes through from the barrel as well, depending on what you're doing with that barrel. Whether there's another toasting going on, a little bit of a light char, but it's very recent. Now that also brings me then to: are you distilling the product, or are you buying in the rums and then aging them?
We buy in the rum, and I'm very proud of this, and I'm, you know, we don't hide the fact we're not distillers. Our provenance is Barbados. So our rum is a fresh distillate, 3-year-old, 5-year-old rum, aged in American oak casks and aged in the country of origin. And it comes to us 70% proof. Our bottling plant, they kind of refine the blend and use Scottish water into it and bring it down to the 42.3%. So in essence, we cut the rum, you know, to be brutal. We import and we cut. And I think when we looked at this initially, the business was started by my kids, who worked in the bar industry. They were both management and all bar one in Edinburgh, and they wanted to start their own alcohol business. And we talked quite a long time about how we do this and how we get around this. And we said, look, first of all, what are you going to do? And they said, well, look, in the bars, and this is 7 years ago, there's more and more people, young people, ordering rum at the bar. You know, gin's going to crash out. I mean, gin's done fantastic things. Whiskey, there is not snobbery whiskey, but you know, you have to be there. So rum was the choice, and we went through a whole process of doing tastings, you know, and then once we had a rum we liked, we then went back and got derivatives of that rum, and we eventually got to a stage where we had blind tastings against some of the well-known rums, and on the blind tastings we chose our own rum. You know? So looking at the aging process, it's hard to age rum in a temperate climate. Tropical maturation is sought after, you know, as a sought after trait in modern rums. So we thought, well, you know, why don't we just go down this route? We don't have the money to invest in a distillery.
Yeah.
We don't have the qualifications enough to do it, but we're going through that process. You know?
Yeah. But then there's a lot of trial and error as well. And there's a lot of, I love rum for its uniqueness and its positioning.
Yes.
And, there is a new categorization coming out. It's very interesting seeing Scottish rums and where they come from. There's a huge history with Scotland,
Yes.
and that goes across the islands, Edinburgh, Glasgow,
yes,
some of the border towns as well, coastal. And there is a dark history there, but there's also a history of heritage and provenance that's there.
Absolutely.
And yes, people talk about, and I worked for Caribbean rum distillers for a long time, and I love Caribbean rum. And I think it's the way you look at kind of Japanese whiskey. They've taken the base for what they're doing from Scotland. You've got that tradition, you've got technique and production, and you're obviously using a different ingredient, but there's a lot of innovation on there. There's a lot of different layers or kind of sectors and styles towards rum.
Yes.
And I think it's just about communication. It's about honesty and authenticity.
Absolutely.
And each person, that it is subject to how what does someone perceive their rum to be? What do they like? And there's nothing wrong with that. There's something for every occasion as well.
Well, I agree with you. I listen to a lot of podcasts, rum podcasts, and it's interesting how diverse and how massive rum is becoming. And I listened to Richard Seal on one of his podcasts, and he said, like what you drink, but know what you drink. And it's very important. I think it's very important. Yeah. We don't hide the fact we don't distill ourselves, but I think we've got a cracking rum. And and I think we've got a great brand. I think our brand is really strong. Our brand is building. We can't talk about the low wines. We can't talk about the wash really, because we're not there for the actual distillation process. But I've done a lot of research on what we've got. And I know that our sugar cane's from Barbados.
Yeah.
I know that our molasses is from Guyana. Our yeast is from South Africa. So I've kind of, if somebody was asking me questions about that, I think I can answer these questions. Our small hard cuts are 84, 92%. So our rum is a blend of common pot still distillation, double retort pot still distillation. So, I've done the research, and I'm quite happy to answer these questions, but, I find when I'm out at markets and festivals, people glaze over when you start talking about that.
You do. I think you get. I think that's the beauty of. I think sometimes, and I don't mean it in a negative way, it's Scotch. Sometimes it can be confusing for a consumer.
Yeah.
Even those who think they know it so very well. There's a lot of tricks in the trade that are still to be known about, and sometimes we don't need to know everything at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And I think that's the beauty of other people as well. Sometimes, if it looks good to the eye, and you eat with the eye as well, does it taste good? Is flavor there? These are some of the most important elements. The branding's important to you. It's very emotional, personal. Absolutely. But at the end of the day, does it taste good? And do you have that authenticity? Do you have that honesty behind it? I think that's the beauty of it. And I think for me personally, I'm getting really excited about what Scotland's doing with rum. And
so am I. Yeah.
And I think it's still small. Yes. I mean, if I could say one thing about myself, we got it wrong a long time ago. We worked doing some trend forecasting, and we said rum was going to come into this element a few years back. We said 4 or 5 years, and that was actually a few years ago. And then as people were saying to me, I said, you know what? We kind of got it wrong, because I don't think it's just starting to get that hold. Gin's in that momentum, and I think lockdowns helped gin. And rum's now having that, because it's interesting, every recession, aged rums and premium rums, Caribbean style, have definitely, they've enjoyed that sort of growth and that volume.
Yeah.
And now we're coming into this kind of new style and phase, and there's a lot more you're seeing out there. You're seeing some incredible rums from across the world, Clarence, people like Mekong Bay,
Yeah.
And now you're seeing, sorry, I think it's Chalong Bay, not Mekong Bay.
Mm.
And then now you're seeing this movement that's coming from Scotland, this heritage, this profile, people that are interested in distilling, obviously, but taking it in a very different way. And the stories are amazing because there's not always someone who was a rum geek or a rum lover or even thought about it. They thought about it in a very focused sense about business, about tradition, what they could do with what's around them, time and place. And I think all of that's really beautiful with what's happening and the communication that's coming out through the group as well, which is really interesting.
No, absolutely. I think it's Scotland especially is doing amazing things. And I think the only kind of warning we have to watch is that the gin boom went massive, absolutely massive. And gin's probably out of all the drinks, probably the easiest one to manufacture. And it's important that the rum industry doesn't go down that route where we have everybody jumping on the bandwagon because rum started to take off and say no to rum. And you might find you have cheaper versions of rum coming in the marketplace, which could, in essence, damage some of the good that's been done by the guys in Scotland just now that are raising the profile, And that's one thing we should watch.
Yeah, I think that is interesting. There's a trade group being organised and the discussions of how rum should be in the communication.
Yeah.
And that's never going to take away, if you love Malibu rum or you drink this style of rum or even big brands like Bacardi. But when you're faced with what you think should be here, and it's not Scotch, but it obviously gives a certain level of protection.
Yes.
But it's never going to take away from what someone enjoys. If they enjoy that, it's not about maybe a snootiness attitude. It's just trying to do something that's maybe appropriate. And that's really interesting to see as well.
Yes.
And again, I think it's about protecting what people have done because it's by no means is it cheap to do these things.
No.
It's a lot of time and effort and craft and skill. And I think that then is where the value, people might look at some of these rums and go, quite expensive. True, but there's time, there's effort, there's emphasis, and a lot of people aren't big distillers. You need to be these greater industrial sized distillers or medium sized distillers to get that product down as well.
Absolutely.
So a whole level of variances within the category, which is very interesting as well.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I think you've 100% right. Yeah, no, definitely. Definitely. And I think the price point is very important. And again, it's a perception, isn't it? Because, when we were younger, when I was if you're looking for a bottle of whiskey, you'd go to Asda and you'd think 14, 15 quid, that's great, it's fantastic. Wow. And we're pitching ours, at £35 for a 70 cl bottle. And when we're out in the marketplace, we very rarely get anybody saying, wow, that's expensive. We actually get a lot of people saying, oh, it's good value. Yeah. So it's a perception. It really is a perception. And again, it goes back to what you believe is your product. You believe your product's really good. You can pitch your price where you want it to be. It's interesting.
It is very interesting. There's a lot, but it's we're in that infancy, but there's a lot there, I think, that are incredible positives for
absolutely
and production.
Absolutely.
And good things like,
a lot of
festival, for example, bringing that to consumers and audiences, which can only improve things without, having those complex layers on top of them as well.
Yes.
And I think Scotland's an interesting moment, the way it's going with kind of pure rums and spiced rum and botanical rum. Botanical rum's an interesting one for me. I get it if it's just pure botanics or people using the statement. That'll be interesting as we start to move forward. But if the product tastes good, and there's authenticity there, then absolutely. And the communication's right, then why not? Why not?
Absolutely. I remember our guy that did our labels, he said to me, Gary, I will sell your first bottle. You've got to sell the rest. Because we talk about the brand, and he was so right. He says, I'll bring them in, I'll sell your first bottle, but you've got to have something at the back of that can sell the rest. And that's so true.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for talking to us here. We'll see you at Scottish Rum Fest.
Looking forward to it, Jamie.
Join the Rumburra for the rest of the evening.
Thank
you, Gary.